The city still looked wealthy from above. Glass towers reflected the final orange glow of sunset across empty financial districts. Luxury cars moved silently beneath giant digital billboards, still advertising watches, vacations, and investment firms pretending the future remained stable. Restaurants were still open, flights still departed, stock markets still flickered green across television screens, mounted inside penthouse apartments, and somewhere high above the streets, inside a silent luxury tower overlooking the skyline. A man unlocked a hidden safe. Inside were rows of gold coins. Perfectly preserved, heavy, ancient. Untouched by inflation, he stared at them with the calm confidence of someone who believed he had understood history correctly. Because for years, he had listened carefully when economists said currencies eventually fail. He listened when governments printed trillions. He listened when debt spiraled beyond comprehension. He listened, and like millions before him, he reached the same conclusion every civilization eventually reaches when paper money begins dying. By gold. Gold survives empires. Gold survives politicians. Gold survives monetary collapse. At least, that is what history appears to say. Then came the knock at the door. Not loud, not violent, just controlled, official. The kind of knock that instantly transforms a private room into occupied territory outside his apartment. The elevators had stopped, functioning again. Food prices had tripled in 3 weeks. Banks were limiting withdrawals. Currency traders disappeared overnight. Police checkpoints had quietly emerged near transportation hubs. And suddenly, the man realized something terrifying. His gold still held value, but value and safety were no longer the same thing. That is the paradox almost nobody discusses during financial collapse. Modern financial culture treats gold like a magical shield against chaos. Internet commentators speak about it with religious certainty. When currencies die, they say, gold protects you. But history tells a darker story, because throughout history, many people who correctly predicted collapse still lost everything, not because they misunderstood economics, because they misunderstood power. In Weimar Germany, families hid gold coins inside walls, while hyperinflation transformed middle-class professionals into beggars almost overnight. In Argentina, jewelry became emergency currency exchanged quietly for food and medicine behind closed doors. In Zimbabwe, people carried backpacks full of worthless cash, while smugglers demanded payment in gold dust at rural border crossings. And yet, something strange kept happening. The people holding gold often became targets themselves. Governments noticed them. Criminals noticed them. Desperate neighbors noticed them, because during hyperinflation, wealth stops behaving like wealth. It behaves like exposure. That is why financial collapse is never just an economic event. It is a transformation of social trust. The moment currencies begin collapsing, societies enter a psychological metamorphosis. Relationships change. Morality bends. Fear spreads silently between strangers like smoke inside a sealed building, and suddenly, preserving wealth becomes dangerous in ways spreadsheets cannot measure. What happens when your savings make you visible? What happens when survival depends less on value and more on invisibility? What happens when liquidity matters more than wealth itself? Because during true collapse, a gold coin may theoretically buy an entire month of food. But who exactly can break the coin? Who can verify it? Who can safely exchange it without attracting attention? And who might simply take it? Hyperinflation creates strange inversions. Doctors begin accepting cigarettes. Mechanics prefer gasoline. Truck drivers demand batteries. Farmers trust canned food more than bank transfers. The measuring stick of civilization begins melting. And when that happens, societies do not merely lose money, they lose orientation. That is why history becomes so unsettling during monetary collapse, because the people who survive best are often not the wealthiest. Sometimes they are the least noticeable, sometimes they are the most connected. Sometimes they are simply the people who understood one terrifying truth before everyone else. When systems begin collapsing, governments stop asking what is fair. They ask what keeps the system alive. And throughout history, the moment populations begin abandoning official currency for alternative stores of value, those alternatives suddenly become political threats. Gold owners imagine they are escaping the system, but the system often interprets that escape as rebellion. That is why hyperinflation creates one of the darkest paradoxes in financial history. The very asset designed to preserve freedom can quietly attract control, and this pattern is far older than modern banking. It stretches backward through collapsing empires, wartime economies, authoritarian regimes, and democracies under stress. Because beneath every currency crisis lies the same invisible battle, a battle over belief. And in every hyperinflationary collapse, one asset rises in price faster than gold itself. Trust, but almost nobody notices it until it's already gone. Hyperinflation does not begin with numbers, it begins with denial, long before prices explode, before shelves empty, before citizens rush toward hard assets and foreign currencies. Something quieter happens first. People stop trusting tomorrow, and history reveals this pattern with disturbing consistency. The Roman Empire understood it. At the height of Roman power, silver coins known as denarii circulated across one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Trade flourished, armies expanded, infrastructure stretched across continents, but maintaining empire became expensive. Wars multiplied, political corruption deepened, tax revenues weakened. So Roman leaders chose the solution nearly every stressed government eventually discovers. They diluted the currency. Silver content inside Roman coins slowly disappeared while officials insisted stability remained intact. Coins still looked similar. The empire still projected strength. Markets still functioned, but ordinary citizens sensed reality before governments admitted it. Trust began eroding silently beneath the surface. And that is how most monetary collapses begin. Gradually in psychology, suddenly in mathematics, centuries later, Weimar Germany would experience the same transformation with terrifying speed. At first, inflation seemed manageable, then inconvenient, then absurd. Workers rushed to spend wages. Before sunset, because prices changed by the hour, parents pushed wheelbarrows filled with currency through streets where bread cost billions of marks. Savings accumulated across entire lifetimes evaporated into economic dust, and during the chaos, gold owners initially appeared brilliant. They had escaped the collapse, or so it seemed, but something darker emerged underneath the economics. Social trust began. Mutating. Neighbors became suspicious of one another. Criminal networks expanded. Political extremism surged through desperate populations, searching for someone to blame. Gold preserved purchasing power, but it did not preserve stability. That distinction would repeat across almost every major hyperinflationary event in modern history. In Yugoslavia during the 1990s, inflation accelerated so rapidly that citizens abandoned official systems almost entirely. Informal markets replaced state structures. Foreign currencies circulated secretly. Fuel, cigarettes, and food became parallel forms of money. Meanwhile, governments became increasingly aggressive toward economic behavior they could no longer control. That is the hidden paradox beneath hyperinflation. The moment value migrates away from official currency, governments begin targeting whatever replaces it, and history shows this dynamic appears even inside stable democracies. In 1933, during the depths of the Great Depression, the United States government, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, criminalized private ownership of significant amounts of gold, not during Weimar-style collapse, not during societal breakdown, not during civil war. Inside the world's rising economic superpower, citizens were ordered to surrender gold to the federal government in exchange for paper currency. And suddenly, millions of Americans discovered something deeply unsettling. Owning an asset and controlling an asset are not the same thing. Throughout history, states tolerate alternative stores of value only until those alternatives threaten confidence in the official system, because currencies are not merely financial instruments, they are political instruments. And when faith in official money begins collapsing, governments often react as if society itself is under attack. That is why hyperinflation transforms everyday life. So dramatically, teachers become black market traders. Doctors demand payment in dollars. Engineers exchange labor for food, retirement. Accounts become tragic jokes repeated quietly at dinner tables. The middle class disappears first, not with explosions, not with headlines, but silently. One compromised purchase at a time, And perhaps the strangest psychological transformation emerges around visible wealth. Hyperinflationary societies become obsessed with hard assets, while simultaneously growing hostile toward the people holding them, because scarcity changes moral perception. In stable societies, wealth often appears aspirational. In collapsing societies, it begins appearing suspicious, and once populations start seeing each other through the lens of scarcity rather than cooperation, civilizations begin entering dangerous territory, because the greatest danger in hyperinflation is not that money becomes worthless, it is that people begin seeing each other differently. Hyperinflation looks chaotic from the outside, but underneath the panic lies a hidden structure, a system, almost mechanical in its behavior, like watching an enormous suspension bridge collapse one cable at a time while officials insist the foundation remains secure. The first misunderstanding most people have about hyperinflation is believing it begins with money printing alone. It does not. Money can be printed for years without immediate collapse. What truly matters is confidence. Currencies survive because populations collectively believe tomorrow will resemble today. People accept paper money because they trust other people will also accept it later. Hyperinflation begins the moment that belief fractures, and once trust begins disappearing, the process accelerates psychologically before it accelerates economically. Citizens rush to spend currency faster. Businesses increase prices preemptively. Banks tighten restrictions. Governments intervene more aggressively. The entire system enters a feedback loop driven by fear. This is why gold behaves so strangely during collapse. Gold does not suddenly become magical. The measuring stick simply disintegrates. That distinction changes everything. Imagine standing beside a ruler made of melting ice. You are not growing taller. The ruler is collapsing. That is what inflation does too. Currency. And when governments realize citizens are escaping into alternative stores of value, pressure intensifies rapidly. Capital controls emerge. Withdrawal limits appear. Asset reporting laws expand. Emergency taxes arrive disguised as patriotic necessity. Border agents begin searching luggage more carefully. Financial surveillance quietly multiplies. Escaping the currency system threatens national survival itself. Gold ownership slowly transforms from financial strategy into political signal. And then comes the liquidity paradox. One of the least discussed realities of systemic collapse. During stable times, wealth is measured by theoretical value. During unstable times, wealth is measured by exchangeability. What can actually be traded safely, quietly, and immediately? A gold coin may contain enormous purchasing power, but who can divide it? Who can authenticate it? Who can exchange it without attracting attention? During extreme crises, practical survival often shifts towards smaller, more flexible assets. In Venezuela, certain medications became more valuable than luxury goods. In Zimbabwe, fuel and batteries sometimes functioned more effectively than precious metals in daily transactions. During wartime shortages across Europe, cigarettes transformed into parallel currency because everyone recognized them instantly. Collapse rewrites utility, and utility often outranks theoretical wealth. This creates another hidden layer beneath hyperinflation. Two economies emerge simultaneously: the official economy and the invisible economy. The official economy continues, operating publicly through failing currency systems, government announcements, and increasingly distorted price controls. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, shadow markets expand rapidly. Barter networks, foreign currencies, smuggling routes, private exchanges, unregistered transactions. Gold often migrates into this underground world. But participation carries enormous risk because shadow economies exist outside legal protection. Deals depend on trust between frightened strangers. Violence increases, fraud expands. Authorities monitor behavior more aggressively, and slowly. Ordinary citizens begin living double lives. One version for the official system, another for reality. This is why hyperinflation feels psychologically suffocating. Banks stop feeling safe. Savings become radioactive. Rules change unpredictably. The future itself begins feeling unstable. And throughout history, something deeply unsettling keeps repeating. Many individuals holding gold preserved wealth mathematically, yet still lost freedom, still lost security, still lost power, because financial collapse does not occur inside spreadsheets. It occurs inside spreadsheets. It occurs inside societies. And once societies enter survival mode, economic logic alone stops determining outcomes, which raises a disturbing question. If gold protects wealth during collapse, why did so many people holding gold still lose everything that mattered? In the past, hyperinflation could remain local, a national tragedy, an isolated currency collapse, a contained disaster unfolding behind borders. But the modern financial system no longer functions like separate islands. It functions like an electrical grid, interconnected, fragile, capable of transmitting panic. Across continents within seconds, today, currencies are tied together through debt markets, energy systems, trade agreements, derivatives, reserve holdings. And algorithmic capital flows so complex that almost nobody fully understands the machinery anymore, which creates an unsettling possibility. Modern hyperinflation may spread psychologically before it spreads economically. A rumor becomes a bank run. A bank run becomes a liquidity crisis. A liquidity crisis becomes political instability. And suddenly, trust evaporates globally in real time. This is why governments themselves continue accumulating gold quietly while publicly presenting modern finance as stable and permanent. Because beneath the language of innovation, central banks still understand an ancient truth. When confidence disappears, civilizations return to tangible stores of value. Across recent years, nations facing sanctions, reserve currency fears, and geopolitical uncertainty have steadily increased gold reserves. Governments publicly celebrate digital finance while privately storing metal inside fortified vaults beneath mountains and central banks. That contradiction reveals something important. Ordinary citizens buy gold trying to escape the system, governments buy gold trying to preserve the system. Same asset, opposite purpose. And this tension becomes even more dangerous inside highly digitized economies because future crises may not require physical confiscation at all. Modern systems possess quieter tools. Bank accounts can freeze electronically.